did you become a champion of women-only executive education programs? What do you think is the value added there?
All my research as a historian of women and in my role as a leader of organizations had shown me that women, on the whole, don't exchange experience and do the kind of shooting the breeze, examining what they did right and what they did wrong, laughing about mistakes, helping one another correct them, nearly as openly in an audience that's composed of men and women as compared to women talking alone among themselves. Men do it all the time. They have lots of sociability groups for it, sports, stopping off at the bar on the way home, just buddies getting together and shooting the breeze. Women's time, if they are adult women in the working world, is so tightly scheduled that there isn't much opportunity for just sharing experience, coaching one another, and learning from one another. And I've noticed in all the large organizations I've worked that women rush home because they do have another shift. And men may, but somehow or other, they will find a way to get together and talk about work. The other thing, of course, is that since there's still quite a lot of pressures on women who are full-time outside the home, even today, women, when they do get together, often talk about the family and the children and not about, did I really blow that presentation, or how can I really frame the opportunities for the next promotion. And so their talk is even centered about work a lot of the time. So I thought there would be tremendous benefit in having a program that brought women executives together and gave them both a format in which to talk, a whole set of concepts and structures in which to analyze their lives, but also the free time to shoot the breeze. And I don't know whether they still do it, but in the early days of the program, the graduates used to organize a conference call at least once a month and keep right on coaching one another. May not be necessary now, but it was in those early days. Then also, when we did the research on whether or not a program for women would attract gifted applicants and would be valued by corporations, we learned a number of very interesting things. The first was that the women said, these were our alumni who were all working in Fortune 500 companies, that they had the skills to do any of the jobs that they aspired to, but they didn't have the language. They didn't have an understanding of how they appeared to others as leaders, and they also lacked some just very specific things. Finance was one. Corporate finance wasn't a standard part of a woman's education in the 70s and early 80s. And the other was the whole language and conceptual framework in which you talk about strategy. And women learn that today, young women, in team sports, but in the early days of the program they didn't have that background or experience. And it's not standard for women to sit around and watch the football on the weekend and analyze the game and figure out who had the best strategy and why. So it was corporate finance, strategic analysis, and self-awareness and development as a leader that we thought women would do better being taught as a group.
Great, thank you. What do you think, even now, in the first decade of the 21st century, what are the particular challenges that women still face? And how can they best prepare to overcome or to master those challenges?
Well, I think that the challenges are both the same and different. I think young women now have the chance to be recruited into any number of general management and executive roles. But if they're married, they still have the same time constraints. And remember that we started out this program organizing it so women could do it in a very condensed time period, free of family responsibilities and so on. So I think the time pressures are still there. They still face the same questions about when to have children and how to manage family responsibilities. And fortunately, they're better paid, but it's still very expensive to get full-time childcare in one's own home. So they face all sorts of issues to work through there. And I believe those are best worked through in the company of other women. We learn a great deal of confidence out of sharing other people's experience in person. You can read about it, but it's talking to someone else who's done it that's really an important source of confidence. I think that they still face the problem of getting good feedback. Even today, I find that unless there's very, very careful training of male supervisors about how to communicate to the women who report to them, it's still difficult for them to do. I laugh about it every time I talk to some of the women in investment banking and some of the financial services firms I know. Because of course the compensation is put together at the end of the year on what you contributed to the deals. It's because you're on the team. And it's very natural for a man to go in and thump the table and say, I got this deal, I did this, I contributed that. It's still not exactly an easy thing for a woman to do. And I find they often do it better by voicemail or email, but they won't do it in person. And that's something that I think, again, you can learn from other people who have done it and will help you think about how to report yourself truthfully, but with confidence about what you've achieved. Because I still hear women say, who are very successful, oh, I was just in the right place at the right time. I never hear men say that, ever. And I think it's important to realize that your success may have an element that's fortuitous, but the ability to exploit that element of fortune is not. That's the person. So I think those challenges are still there. What's gone, and what I find very, very refreshing is nobody doubts any longer that a woman can run an organization or that she can develop all the skills necessary to do the most complex kinds of business activities. And that was certainly something that had to be overcome and has been overcome, I think, in the last, 30, 35 years or so. I think the other thing that, however, is still a bit of a challenge is the point at which a woman wants to move into really senior executive ranks seems to be the point where a lot decide that they don't want to do that. And I am not sure, because I don't think there's been very good research done on it, whether that's a function of the fact that family life is harder to manage if you have to travel all the time, and harder to manage if you work 7 days a week and on any time schedule. But that does seem to be a decision point that's different, because in 3 decades ago, women didn't even face that problem. The opportunities, though, are just huge. They have a first-rate education. Nobody thinks it's an extraordinary thing for a woman to be a mathematician and an economist and so on and so forth today. Nobody thinks it's strange for them to be an engineer. Look at Smith's engineering program. Nobody thinks that leadership is a problem for women anymore. So those are huge pluses. But many of the things that involve managing a family, finding the partner in life who's absolutely willing to fit in with or mesh another career with the challenges of a high-pressure executive life is still an issue. But they're there and they're real. And I think, as we see today, you're still expected to perform considerably better than a male peer if we look at the way the media treat women CEOs and so on. But nonetheless, they're there and the jobs are there now. Not in the number we'd like to see, but the change is quite remarkable over recent years.
It really is. What do you think there is any likelihood that as the next generation moves into the workplace with a decidedly different definition of what a work week should be like,
Yeah.
That from your vantage point as an observer of corporate cultures and as someone who has sat on many corporate boards, what is the likelihood that organizations will change, will morph even more in the next decade or two to become more, not even female friendly or family friendly, but humanity friendly, to understand the importance of a balanced life as a necessary component of productivity and good health?
Well, you know, everyone talks about work-life balance. But I think that balance has to be worked out between partners, or if you're a single person, in your own life. And people have to find their own ways of renewing and refreshing themselves. For me, it's music, or gardening, or the out of doors. And I don't need to have 2 days a week doing that. A few hours is quite enough for me. Other people need a lot more. Many people need more sleep than others. But I think if you really love what you're doing and have no inner conflicts about it, you will be able to find how to refresh and renew yourself. But it won't be the standard 9 to 5 or the nice long weekend. If you're going to work in a large organization that works around the globe, and in which the business environment can change in a nanosecond if there's some meltdown of a currency or political crisis or whatever, you're going to have to live a very fast, very, very demanding life that it's not something you can easily switch off from. So I don't think it's exclusively a female problem. I think it's a problem for men too. And the only way that I can think of advising people is, if you're not sure that this is what you love, then look for something that will be less demanding and more easily adjusted in its time frame. I mean, many of my generation, women who've become professionals of one kind or another, have finished up not in the area in which they specialized in first, because they wanted to have a predictable day. And if that's your choice, then that to me makes great sense. I think what's troublesome for everyone is not to have enough self-awareness to know that, yes, this is how I want to live my life, even though the much admired path is to go headlong into the highest echelon of an organization you could want. Now, that's what I've always wanted in my life, and I fortunately found a partner who was willing to adjust his schedule to mine, as I did to his whenever we needed to. But I really wanted to run organizations, always had done, and had no shadow of a doubt about it. But I could imagine that if you did, and you were still working at 1 o'clock in the morning and going to start at 6 the next morning, you might think, I've made a dreadful mistake. But if you really love it, then you get enough adrenaline for the time demands.
Great. One last question. In your opinion, are there ways for women to leverage uniquely their femaleness in leadership roles?
Well, I've always been very much opposed to the notion that women needed training in aggressiveness and so forth. I believe that people can lead in so many different ways. And the best leaders, male or female, are pretty androgynous. They have a strong intuitive understanding of people. They communicate well. They manage emotions well. But they also have great capacity for analysis and rational decision paths and so on and so forth. The unique thing that they do seem to contribute in many mixed groups is a greater capacity to hear what other people are saying, because women are trained from infancy to do that. So they read other people's body language, they really listen to what the person is saying. They're not quite so involved in their own thought processes that they don't get what the other person's talking about. But men who succeed in leadership in major organizations have to develop those skills. Women bring them with them already.